then, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me? Don't tell me I've got the graveyard session. Can you all hear me? Thank you. Well, I'm HR, right? So obviously, I'm very passionate about my profession. Just like, how many of you are passionate about your to-do profession? Everybody's hands up should be in the air, you know? Okay. All right. I've been in the HR profession for over 25 years, okay? Predominantly in senior roles, predominantly in the public sector, but also in the third charity sector. I've also worked as an employed person, as a self-employed person, and now I lecture myself, okay? I'm not going to tell you any more about myself because I am not the budding architect, so you don't want to know my journey. So we shall just carry on with this, shall we? Yes? So my usual style is interactional. So if anybody wishes to share their passionate views with me, I'm very interested. If you all look down and do not make any eye contact, I understand. Okay? Is that all right? So what we're going to be talking about today, they asked me to talk to you about strategic approaches to people management. So it's not the operational day-to-day things, right? But in terms of, in an organization, how does HR operate on a strategic basis? Okay? Shall we go? Okay, let's go. So, first of all, this is the session overview. So, why do we need HR? Does it really matter? Yes? What is it? Now, some of you may think, no, I don't know what you're talking about, Joshi. What a load of rubbish, you know. But obviously, I'm not going to say that. I'm hoping that you're going to walk out with a different view. So, what is the link? So, first of all, what is HR? And secondly, what is the link to HR to the business? Yes? And that's the key thing, right? In your roles, in your aspiring journeys to become an architect, right? Not only will you be dealing with people in the client and provider situation, right? But you'll also be managing teams. How many of you already manage teams now? Yes? How many of you have line managers? Yeah? So some of this will resonate with you, okay? But what we need to understand is the link between HR and the business and why it's so important, all right? And then also, I'm going to give you, because I've only got 1.5 hours and I could go on, I'm going to give you 2 approaches. And I'm sure some of you have already got the slides, and I'm sure you've already read the slides and are keen to come and stand here and join me on stage. No? Okay. Right? So 2 approaches that will help you design the appropriate HR strategy for your organization. Yes? For those of you who are aspiring to become directors in your careers, this is good stuff to know. Okay? Right. And key approaches when you're looking at any human resources strategy is, how do we lead people? How do we understand what a team is? And how do we develop a team? What are the components of a team? Right? Okay? What are the issues with people and teams? And the biggest question of all, where many people still don't have that eureka moment, which is, how do we engage staff? How do we engage people? Okay? Now, some of this is relevant, obviously, in the workplace, but also in other areas where you're trying to engage people too. Does that make sense? Okay? And finally, we'll conclude with, why are people matters most important to your business? Is that okay? Sound all right? Okay. So, can anybody who is so keen now, after having lunch, after having a CDM session this morning, planning for the next session, tell me what your view is of what is a strategy? What do you think a strategy is? I don't care how polished or unpolished your view is. Anybody? Who was that? Sorry. Long-term plan. Yep, that's good. Okay, that's good. Let's just stop there then. Thank you. So, strategy is a long-term plan. Any sort of plan. Have I just made somebody laugh? Okay. Strategy is the direction and scope of an organization in a long-term plan. So it's a long-term plan, but you're also deciding where you want to go, why, and how. Does that make sense? Now, this is relevant for any strategy, not just for HR. All right? But obviously, my focus is for HR here today. All right? Then uses resources to achieve advantage. So yes, we have a plan, but what is it that we're trying to achieve, and what resources do we have to achieve that? And obviously, with designing a HR strategy, we're looking at people as our key resources. Yes? And that's purely a business term, right? So skills, knowledge, competence, what do we have in our organization in order to maximize our business strategy, yeah? Where we develop a good HR strategy to develop our HR business strategy. Our business strategy. Does that make sense? Okay, right? And also, when we look at long term, some people have different views of what long term is. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. We all know now, I certainly have experienced, that change is a constant. And I'm sure you've heard that term many a times as well, yes? Change is the new constant, if you like. So within any strategy that you have, you must build in flexibility, right? You must build in flexibility in order for your strategy to be agile enough to change with what's going on in the environment. Does that make sense? Okay? So one of the contracts I worked with was within the NHS. And people, what they described to me is what's going on in the NHS, and you'll probably see in the press as well, is there is change fatigue going on, right? Now, the NHS as an organization is dictated through employment legislation like we all are, but more so which political party and who the minister is for the NHS makes a massive difference. And changes can happen like that. Click of a finger, right? I remember walking in one day, on a Friday, my director saying to me, Joshi, we have to get people together on Monday, and I don't know now whether we've got the funds to keep this business going, to keep this group going, right? But I'm going to do my best over the weekend, and she was talking to ministers, etc. So I got 2 presentations together. One to say, your jobs are gone, and one to say, they're here. We didn't tell the staff because there's no point. The other thing as well, when you're dealing with staffing issues, as a senior manager and somebody managing that kind of change, you've got to be mindful about what is the impact of the messages that you give to people, right? And if things are going on like this, then people cannot keep up with that. But the NHS is big on communication and tells everybody everything that's going on. And that's not always the greatest way of doing things. Tell me when it's important is what people want to know, right? Luckily, we had the presentations ready on Monday. I traveled from one end to another, from the northwest to the Midlands. I said, right, what's the plan? Because Joshi, we've got money, but there are certain savings we're going to have to do, which is great. But this is how agile you have to be just when you're developing preparing to deliver a message to staff. So can you imagine if you're locked into a long-term HR strategy, would that work, right? And I'm sure, now please excuse my naivety here. When you are presenting plans when you're for a project to build a house, right? Are your plans rigid, right? Do you allow some flexibility, or is not enough so the house collapses, of course, but enough so that you can make changes as and when. Does that make sense? I don't believe that with the house builders, though, because they're very strict on what you can and cannot have it to the colors of the doors, but there we go, okay? So, and I wanted to emphasize that point because I think one of the key things about strategies is people are so hung up on designing and writing strategies, but by the time they're written, they become extinct. I'm going to be careful. Just be mindful of that, okay? And finally, a strategy isn't just delivered by an organization. An organization is made up of people, right? And different people will be contributing differently, depending on their roles, depending on their skills, right? And it might not just be within the organization. You'll want people outside the organization as well, right? So the key thing about a great HR strategy, right, or any strategy, is to understand who your stakeholders are and involve them, yes, and include them. Does that make sense? Common sense stuff so far? Yeah? I'll test you. No. Okay. So when we're developing an organizational strategy, so we have kept it simple, right? Okay. So when you are assessed in any way, you're writing your project, hopefully this will give you some kind of to-do list, all right? So the big thing is determine an organization's mission or vision. How many of you work for an organization that has a mission statement or vision statement, right? And how many of you can actually now share with everybody your vision statement? You can? Okay, all right. So again, what is the purpose of a vision statement, right? Yes, we all have it because an organization is also a window to the rest of the world, right? So it has to show some commitment. People might not be able to remember and obviously share the vision statement verbatim, but at least if they have an idea of what kind of organization am I working for. As long as you have that in your head, and then that is a starting point to decide what kind of strategy you need in order for your business to deliver what it is that you want it to deliver. Does that make sense? Okay. So then the next thing is, where are we now? Right? Okay, so before we even decide where do we want to go and by when do we want to get there, the key thing is, where are we now? Yeah? So in any organizations, who are our customers? Who are our clients? Who are our patients? Yeah? Who's our demographic? Yes, so who's our demographic, right? And in the service that we provide, where are we with that? Yes? Are we satisfied? Are we dissatisfied? What is it? Yeah? And do we understand what's going on in the external environment, whether it's the political world, the legal world, you know, the industry sector that we operate in? Do we understand all of that to ensure we're very clear where we're at now? Because that's a key question that people forget to ask themselves or even focus on. Do you know what? We need to focus on the whole spectrum of what our strategic position is, not just one aspect or not just a problem that we're trying to solve. Does that make sense? But also remember that you cannot have 10 strategic priorities, though you will see that, right? You've got to be able to understand where we're at now, that when you're delivering your strategic or thinking of where we want to go, think about being realistic. Yes? Be realistic as to what you can achieve. These are academically very sexy to understand, but in practice, very difficult. Okay? And again, that's what I go on to specify: realistic but challenging strategic objectives. So if you had your strategic position where you think, do you know what, there's 2 or 3 things that we want to actually get better. We want to increase our market share. Yes? Want to increase our market share. And I don't know, we've got 10% now. In 10 years' time, we want to be 30%. Right? So that's quite a stretching target, if you like. Yes? If you're 10% now and you think, do you know what, we're happy, we'll go for 12% in the next 10 years. Is that going to give people that oomph and that motivation to work that extra, to walk that extra path to achieve excellence for your organization? Do you think so? What do you think? Yeah? Targets are important, but make sure they're large enough to help you motivate to achieve something and take your organization into where you want to go. But also not too much where it's unrealistic that you can't achieve it and you've demotivated your staff. Yeah? Okay? Then, before you decide your final priorities, think about, well, these are the 4 or 5 areas that I'm really interested in, right? Let's just have a discussion about what that looks like in practice if we were trying to achieve it. Yes? Right? So, that's about screening your strategic priorities. Is it realistic? Can we really achieve this? For some organizations, is there going to be a change in political power? Yes? Is that Brexit, for example? Lots of organizations are having discussions about Brexit. Some people are taking moves to say, do you know what? Do you not want to operate out of London anymore? We want to move. Right? Some organizations are saying, do you know what? We'll see what happens come February, March time. We'll see what happens. So there is no wrong or right here. What's wrong or right is the quality of the discussions that you have. Does that make sense? And the realism of the conversations that you have. Okay? So was that a question or not? Okay. Maybe they want to come in too, no? Okay. Then you propose your plans for translating strategy into action. Usually the way strategic objectives are written as what's. This is what we want to do. Yes? This is what we want to do. That's important. So strategies are usually a what. Yes? And a time frame. What and a time frame. Yes? We need a plan to execute that strategy. Right? And that's the hows and the who's. Yeah? The how are we going to do this, and who's going to do it? Who's going to be responsible, and who's actually going to do the doing? Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. And again, devise implementation strategy, which links to what I've already just said. Then the other thing is, how do we know how we're doing? How do we know how we are doing? Right? So ensure that any objectives that you put into your implementation plan, you have a way of measuring that. Right? So to put in simple terms, and I'm just going to use the analogy of sickness, right? Which people see as, you know, a cost, especially when you've got high sickness levels in an organization, right? Maybe you're over the industry target, yes? And maybe when you've analyzed your sickness for a period of, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and you've decided that these are persistent offenders. I used to work for the police, so that's my term that I adopted from years ago. Persistent offenders are people who are taking, and I'm sure there's none of you that do that too, but persistent offenders are people who take days off when they shouldn't. Okay? Now that costs organization money. As a director in your company, that will cost you money, right? So you want to have some strategies as to how you're going to ensure that you reduce that absence, that type of absence. Yes? So you're very clear. This is where we're at now. We're running at, I don't know, 25%. That's a lot, yes, when the industry average is about 3. All right? And then you think, okay, our commitment is to reduce the 25% to at least meet the industry standard. That's quite a jump, right? Then maybe in the next 5 years, right? So then what you want to do is every year you're going to break down what your target is to reach that 3% or whatever the industry average is going to be. Does that make sense? Yes? And then when you're doing that as well, what you're going to do, what are the interventions that you are proposing, right, that will help you achieve that target? Yeah? And so if you say in the first year you want to, it'll go down to 22%. That's quite realistic from 25 to 22. That's quite, depending on the number of days involved, the number of staff, kind of can be realistic, right? Now, by doing that, year 1, you've only got, you reduce it to 24%. So you're worried now, right? Or are you worried? You've got 4 more years to go. Complacency can build in. But as somebody who's evaluating and measuring what you're doing, somebody will keep an eye on, well, all right, what were the mitigating circumstances as to why we didn't achieve what we achieved? Yes? What were the mitigating circumstances? And are we happy with that? If not, we need to set, or we need to do more in the second year of our 5-year plan to ensure we're back on track, right? What is measured, right, gets managed, is what Peter Drucker said. Do any of you know who Peter Drucker is or heard of him? Right? So we HR people use a lot of management gurus now and then, you know, and some of them tend to be American. So Peter Drucker was a very, very esteemed, actually, American professor, and he wrote plenty of books on leadership, self-development, okay, and also measurement as well, right? And his key thing is, if you don't measure it, it won't get done, and if you don't measure it, the next thing is it won't even get managed. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Got too many toys here, so I've got to make sure I press the right buttons. Okay. So you've got the strategy, and as I said before, we've got to consider the people to deliver it, right? So it's not a, you know, and unfortunately, when HR strategies are drawn up, people do seem to think that people are assets, which they are. But they're not a thing. We have emotions, we have feelings, and they can fluctuate from hour to hour sometimes. Yes? You know, you could be in a really good mood. Your manager just says one thing, and that'll annoy you for actually the rest of the day or even the rest of the week. And that will determine how your performance is going to be, potentially. Agree or disagree? Yeah? Okay? So, how do we keep our staff, if you like, in an optimum position where they are willing and able to deliver your strategy? That's the key thing. And this is not an academic exercise, because things always change, because people are people. Looking at it structurally, though, and this is where things are important, I have been in organizations where I've been asked to, and I have written a HR strategy without there being a business strategy. How difficult do you think that was? Very is the answer, right? Because I'm now thinking of options for my HR strategy, the impact on recruitment, selection, performance development, yes? Learning and development, all those areas of HR, yet I don't even know where the business wants to go. The business tell me, well, you know what, Joshi, things keep changing, so once we've written anything down, things change. So things are all agile. But the problem was we never had enough people in the jobs with the right skills at the right time. And it was always HR's fault. So you do something about that. I'm quite happy to do that, right? But what we need to do is, where do you think you're going first, right? Even if you just give me an indication of where you're going, I'll deal with the agility that we need on our side. But this lack of discussion isn't going to help. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that helps. That actually happens a lot. That happens a lot where the business strategy and the HR strategy, the people who develop both of them don't talk to each other, right? So the basic thing is, you've got to get the right people around the table. Get the business strategy done first, and even developing business strategies, you've got to get your HR, your finance, your IT, all your other functions involved as well, yes? Because then these, if you like, the organizational HR strategy, that's a supporting strategy for your business. The finance will be a supporting strategy. Yeah? That's the enabling strategy. And obviously, underneath that, underneath the HR strategy, we have got recruitment, retention, employee development, performance, employee reward. Yes? Does that make sense? Okay. Are you all still with me? Okay. All right. Okay. So, in order to understand where we need to focus around those 4 areas which are boxed at the bottom there, we need to understand, well, what are current workplace issues at the moment? What's going on in the workplace? Okay? So can anybody shout out what you think without looking at your slides? What's going on in the workplace at the moment? What's going on in your workplace? Don't get me out. And I'm deaf as well. That's not helpful. Sorry? Wage stagnation. I'm glad I'm not the person responsible to deal with that one. Wage stagnation and lack of resources. Yes? Okay, what kind of resources? People. Okay, all right. Sorry? Lack of protocol in the office? Now that's interesting. Tell me more. Betsy goes, why did I say that? That actually, on a serious note, is quite an interesting and very valid point, right? So how do we do things around here, right? What is culturally acceptable? What is culturally not acceptable? So that's looking at a narrow view, but albeit very, very interesting, and a good HR team will, and good line managers will have an idea of what's going on. Because then people do start going their own ways, and corporately, you can't get everyone back. And then what do? We'll have a staff survey to tell us that's what's happening. Right? Okay. So, just a few there. Workloads are increasing. People have a perception that there's not enough people and workloads are increasing. Okay? Right? And even if based on evidence that may not be the case, people have a perception. Right? And remember, in HR, people's perception is the reality. If they feel overwhelmed by the workload, that is a problem that we need to resolve. Yes? Okay, an aging workforce. We do have an aging workforce. Obviously, we're not allowed to retire anymore. Okay, so, and if we do, it's illegal. Or if we ask anyone to retire, it's illegal. Okay, obviously, I know many people who started claiming their pension from their pension funds, and then they have to work still part-time to earn a living, to survive, right? And so this is where we're at, right? At the same time, what does that mean for us as an employer, right? What that means is we have to be aware of people from different generations who are going to be working in one organization. Yes? And depending on which generation you're from, so if you were, you know, in your 80s now, you'd remember aspects of the World War. You'd remember the scarcity. You'd remember how difficult it was to actually just get a piece of bread. You remember how it was when you lost family members, right? And do you know what? That's what shapes you. Yes? To somebody living in the 80s, you know, when there was a recession, yeah, and how that felt. To somebody in the 90s thinking, do you know what, this is really great. And the hipster 60s, 70s, whatever was going on in your generation as you were growing up, that does influence what kind of person you become and how your attitude is even towards work. Agree or disagree? Yes? But what we fail to understand is when we've got, what do you get, Generation X, the millennium generation, you know, I want it all. Everything's a computer game. Right? This is a very general statement, right? Everything's a computer game. I want it all, and I want it now. Yes, I have a 6-year-old too. Yes, yeah? And I want it now. 2, people who have patience, they'll take the time, slow and steady. And what are we trying to do is build thriving workplaces with that variety of generations working together, right? And not on helping each generation understand each other. Do you agree or disagree with that? Yeah? So sometimes I've heard some people say to me, oh, Joshi, really, can't you just get them to retire because they're old and they're slow? I said, well, you do that, and I'll see you at the employment tribunal, right? You know? Yeah? But the thing is, we forget that these people have something to offer. Now, sometimes we're also dealing with people who really genuinely want to retire because they're tired now and they've had enough. But do you know what? As a workplace, we have to keep them motivated. So can you see now the value of a HR strategy? Understanding your workforce is key. Yes? It's not a simple thing about just counting headcount numbers, which again is a challenge. Okay? Slow recruitment, skill shortages. How long does it take from putting an advert in the paper to getting a bum on a seat? Yeah? 3 to 4 months, right? And in that time, what you probably asked for might have even changed. Yes? So, again, that's the constant battle with HR departments and the business, is that you take too long. Most of that is the notice period people forget. Yes? So when, oh, right, okay, I didn't know that because I did a nice little chart. Don't let people criticize them and get very upset, right? So I said, you know what, this is how long the recruitment process is, but the majority, the bulk of it is your notice period. And if it's a chief exec, you're talking 3 to 6 months. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Organizational mergers. Right? And close downs. How many high street shops have we seen closing just in the last month? Right? Not only does it have an impact on the people who are working in those organizations as well, which is very sad, but it also has an impact in the workplace, even if you're not working in there, because people genuinely think things are really bad. There's doom and gloom going on. And as in the workplace, you have a sense of responsibility now, as anybody who's dealing with HR, to kind of put some positive perspective in the workplace. Hence the health and well-being agenda. Yes? Hence looking at different areas of, well, okay, how do we motivate our staff? How do we engage our staff? These things are important because there are outside external influences that will impact on how your staff behave on a day-to-day level. Yes? So it's your role, and you're not going to get everybody. So you've got to be wise enough to understand that. Don't get stressed out about that. But in a HR strategy, you've got to at least understand your workforce, what the key challenges are within and outside. Does that make sense? Okay. Low profit margins, again, that will lead to, as you say quite rightly at the back there, wage stagnation. Okay. Absence levels, which we've talked about. Mental health. How many of you have seen advertisements or things from the NHS saying that you've got to look after your mental health? 1 in 4 stats. You know, has anybody seen any of that? How the problem of the mental health in this country? Yeah? Has anybody not seen anything? I think it's okay. Right? Because mental health, stress, anxiety, mental health is on the increase. Right? So when I was a practitioner, most of the time I'll get cases, grievances that come to me when they're at appeal stage. Right? And what usually happens by that time is relationships have usually been broken, damaged, and people are damaged. Yeah? yeah, emotionally, yeah, between the person who's raised the grievance and the people against whom the grievance has been raised. It's not a win-win situation at all. Yeah? And do you know what? In my years, and I've had many of them, I've never have yet to come across, and most of them, pardon me, were related to bullying, harassment. Yeah? Because these are the complex ones where it's a story, it's an emotion. You believe me, it's my story. I just want to be heard. Yeah? And when I say I want to be heard, I want you to remember that my story is right. Yeah, absolute truth. That's how people are. But I've never, ever, ever, ever to this day, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist because it does, come to a point where the bullying, harassment is 100% purely, exclusively related to work. There's always a dimension outside work. Always. Yes? Whether it's a family dynamic, whether it's their personal circumstances, whether it's about how they see themselves. Does that make sense, right? So what we do is try to improve our grievance procedures. Yes? But without that, we can't do any of that because that's just a piece of paper telling you how many stages when somebody has a complaint. But you've got to understand your workforce, and it has to be another way of dealing with this. Yes? Does that make sense? So just saying the absence levels due to stress and mental health, I actually did do some analysis in terms of which teams were going off in one particular organization with absences and what were the reasons if they were being declared, right? And there are times when you can see patterns and deal with that, right? Okay. And uncertainty in external markets, Brexit, which we've already talked about. Okay, so since you've been working, and I assume that most of you have, even if it was just a Saturday job. It's a long time ago before I had a Saturday job. I'm so glad I don't need to sell shoes at Freeman Hardy Willis anymore. Okay. Some of you might not even know what I'm talking about. It's okay. All right? So discuss with the person next to you the biggest change you have seen in the workplace since you have been working. What's the biggest change you've seen in the workplace since you've been working? And this is just a little break from my voice while you fan away this hot air and I cool down too with a sip of water. Okay. Give you a couple of minutes. Okay, everybody. Hello? Hello? Okay, so what kind of things have you come across? What kind of things did you think of? Now, I'm sure you're not the shy and retiring type. Come on. Ways of communication. So you think that's changed dramatically since you've been working? So how? Excellent example. So the way we communicate with people, right? So as we are all focused on this lecture and not looking at our phones or emails, we are probably receiving emails behind the scenes. And it's become an instant need to respond culture. Yes? I remember the day when I used to be posting a letter, guaranteed Royal Mail will lose it, even if it was first class. So it'll be at least 7 days before the letter even got there, right? And then what will happen is you'll get a response, so that's at least 14 days, so 2 weeks clear, right? There is no way we get that now, right? 2 minutes People are on you. Joshi, I sent you an email. I've just forwarded it to you again, just in case you never received the first one. Do you think employers were ready for that change? You think they were? And do you think they responded accordingly? You've got somebody going behind you there. Oh, rude. Not in HR, he said. Okay, sorry. Okay. Right. Okay, all right. Thank you for that. We'll talk about which company you work for. Okay, you were saying no. Go on, in what way? Yes. It's fast. It's fast. Yeah. I've seen a latest email, 10,000 unread emails. Right, 10,000. And that's over a period of, what, 6 months? That's a lot of communication, right? And plus, it doesn't help when you get, when you go to the stores as well, and you say, excuse me, can we have, or if we're dealing with a company, and they want all my email addresses and where I work. I don't think so. And then they get very offended when I don't share it. And I said, look, because we won't email you. I said, yes, you will. You will. I know you will. So don't do this to me. And I do not feel rude for walking away saying, I'm not going to give you my details. Because I've already got enough people that will send me emails, and they've already got my email address without me sharing it with them. Yes? But the pace of change is also an additional stress for our workforce. Yeah? I've been in organizations where they're looking at strategies to manage email traffic. And it's been hard. It's been hard, right? But that has an impact on our workforce, right? Then, as you quite rightly say, as you say, that HR is slow. But so what happens is expectations are raised from every department to act in the same way, right? But there are certain decisions, and I'm not saying that's the case here, but there are certain decisions that take longer, but people have no tolerance for that time, no patience, because that's how it should be. Yes? Okay, what else? Anything from this side of the room? Moving? Constantly moving offices. I've been in organizations where they're constantly, I couldn't even get anybody to move from one desk to another. So how you got people to move offices, that's a strategy. Okay, so what's the problem there then? What can you expand on that, please? And how did the workforce feel about that? Appreciate it. Yeah, yeah. So these things, obviously there's planning involved. Who was the architect? Just saying. But again, what we fail to recognize is that every decision has an impact on staff. That's the key thing. And I think as good HR practitioners and as good business directors, which I'm sure most of you will become, right? You have to be mindful of that. Yeah? Okay. So, the good old Richard Branson, clients do not come first, employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of the clients. You must have heard this before. He thrives his business based on this, right? And I know people who work for, Virgin, and they are very happy because they genuinely feel part of a family. We human beings, without becoming an American motivational speaker, I don't have American blood, by the way, but I'm just saying that sometimes human beings have this need to belong, yes? And even in the workplace, organizations are constantly trying to come up with strategies to help staff and the workforce feel committed and loyal and a sense of belonging in their organizations, and that's a challenge. It's a challenge. Okay, so how do we then, right, in HR, in strategic HR, how do we ensure that our HR, A, meets the business, but also everything that happens in HR is integrated as well together. Yeah, it all works well together. All right? Okay. So when we look at HR, we can't, it's not just about recruitment, retention, performance development, reward, exit. It's also about those idiosyncratic policies, which are policies that don't feel like they should be HR, but they are, right? So diversity, that diversity isn't just about all the protected characteristics that appear in the legislation, the Equality Act, you know, race, gender, sexual orientation, disability. It isn't that. It's more than that. Diversity is wider than that. Yes? Diversity is about what are the skills, knowledge, competencies that an individual can bring to the table. That's what the bigger picture is. Does that make sense? Okay? So if you are going to come up with a good HR strategy and have business objectives that fulfill business aims, you must be mindful of diversity. Also be, I think we've mentioned before, be agile enough to understand that things change. And we can't foresee everything. And that's okay. We don't need to get hung up on that. Sometimes as well, people, or most organizations, don't even have written strategies, right? Going back to the point that Peter Drucker made, yeah? You know, what gets measured gets managed. But also what gets written helps you build a focus, right? Because otherwise, every day you're going to come up with new plans, and overall, you're going to have an erratic strategy, right? Where there is lack of clarity, lack of focus, so in essence, lack of achievement. But with that, if you're part of an organization, you're taking your workforce through that journey as well, right? And then you will have retention issues, because people will just leave. Yes, people will just leave. Too much for people. All right? Okay? Now, talk about HR approaches. So two general HR approaches that are taught to HR practitioners are soft HRM and hard HRM. Okay, some of you may have come across that before. Okay, now let's have a look at them. So, Harvard model of HRM. It's a universal, well-known model, and this is the soft HRM approach. What it does, I'm not going to go through each and every box. You'll be grateful to know. Okay. But what I will say to you, it's an inclusive strategy, inclusive approach rather. Because what it says is, in my organization, I'm looking to develop a HR strategy that will meet my business objectives. Yes? My business objectives, business strategy, they're already written. So as a HR director, I'm now deciding what approach is going to suit my organization. And I've decided it's the soft HRM approach. And that is what the chief exec wants, etc., the executive board, the governors, whoever, everybody. And what that entails is it's inclusive because, A, we'll be looking at the stakeholder. This is not going to work, is it? Oh, no, no. Stakeholder interest. So basically, we identify who our stakeholders are, internal, external, and get them involved. But only get them involved where they need to get involved. Don't over-involve everybody. Too many views unnecessarily will still get you all confused.com. So, who are they? Internal, external. Again, situational factors. We talked about some workplace issues there as well. What's happening in our workplace and what's happening outside our organizations, in our industry, that will affect our workplace. Yes? So that's the thing. Then you're looking at the kind of HRM policy choices, right? What are we looking at? Which HR policies do we need to have focus on? Do we need to focus on recruitment? Are we not recruiting the right people with the right skills at the right time? Are we dealing with retention? You know, as soon as we get people in, they're leaving. Yeah? Do we need to deal with that? Are we looking at employee development? Do you think that we just don't invest enough to develop people? Or is it reward even? Yes? Are we not rewarding our staff? What's the reward? You know, what reward packages do we offer in our industry? And how comparative are we? Yeah? Or how competitive are we? Right? Then, I'll talk about the HR outcomes in a minute. And then what we're also looking, it's a chain here, it's to look at the long-term aim of the Harvard model, that approach, is to not just provide well-being for the individuals in your own organizations, but also organizational effectiveness, and an impact on society where you can, right? So it's quite idealistic, some people will say. But in essence, the approach is soft. It's inclusive, and it actually takes the employee well-being into consideration. Does that make sense? Yeah? So, again, the general mindset behind these approaches is everybody, every individual, irrespective of what role they play in the organization, has a legitimate right to fair treatment, right? Okay? The organizational as well, we understand that everybody has a role to play or, in terms of contribution to organizational success. And so that's the bit about identifying the right stakeholders. And all your workforce is a stakeholder, irrespective of the role and rank. Also, you looked at societal. We know that if we make people redundant, these people, or people lose their jobs, they are then going to go out to society and they're going to not have work. Depending on where you are, demographic-wise, there might not be other organizations available to provide work. It all depends, right? So as an organization, they'll think about the consequences of any action they take within the organization to the impact in society. Does that make sense? Okay? So can you see the bigger picture? This is why this is strategic approaches, because it's the bigger picture. It's not the day-to-day HR operation. Okay. I mentioned to you outcomes of Harvard HRM, which is listed in the model. So we're looking at commitment of the 4 C's, as they call them. So the aim is to ensure that we have policies and procedures and an approach in HR strategy that aims to maximize people's commitment to the organizational mission statement and values. Okay? Yeah? Also congruence. How HRM objectives link in with organizational goals, right? So if we have a business strategy where we are looking to increase market share, right? You'd think then that the key thing would be recruitment and reward, just on the top of my head. Yeah? You'd think that, wouldn't you really, yeah? To make sure that you're very clear on the recruitment strategy to ensure you're recruiting the best, and also it could even be, headhunting as well. It's not just putting an advert in the paper. How are you going to get these people? Because maybe some of these people are working for somebody else and you need to attract them. Yeah? And the other way to do that is you might think, right, we need to think about our reward strategy here now, right? What are we rewarding? What can we afford to reward to increase our market share? Yes? So that's what vertical integration means. Okay? All right? Competence, the right balance of skills, abilities, and knowledge for competitive advantage. Self-explanatory, but making sure you've got the right skill set at the right time, right? But also making sure that if the business aim is to increase market share, you're getting the right type of person in, or people in. And cost-effective, you're doing it, in the most efficient and effective way. Does that make sense? Yeah? Now, the other model is called the Michigan model of HRM, and this is the hard HRM approach. So this is where people are seen as assets in its pure, exclusive way, yeah? The people are here to provide a service in exchange for reward. It's black and white as that. All right? So there, the HR policies that come into play are make sure we select the right people. They go, and then so we know what we're looking for, and we select them based on what we want. The difference with the Harvard one is, yes, we have a spec, but somebody else might just bring that bit more and we'll consider it. Yeah? Michigan is very much, we will select, and then we will performance manage based on what we've selected on. We will then have regular appraisals, right? And then, depending on the appraisal, they'll either get rewarded or we'll also develop them. But you know what? If it doesn't work, they're out. It's very simple. Now, I've just squashed all of that into less than a minute. Can you identify if your organizations have either this approach or the other approach? They're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes there's a mixture. Right? How many of you think, do you know what, I can see that my organization, or I've been in an organization where they just purely treat people like assets? You're all working for wonderful companies, yeah? Oh, no, I've seen a few hands up. Yeah, yeah, thank you. So here, the mindset, again, is the approach is people need to be treated like assets. So they are our equipment or raw materials, right? You obtain them as cheap as possible. So you are not looking, so your recruitment strategy and your reward strategy is cheap and quick, yeah? You use sparingly, and you develop them and exploit them as much as possible, right? So, more, sorry? That's all I, yes, yes. You know what? So we'll develop here, you go through your final stage, you become member of the, your associations, and then the organizations that sponsored you will have about 10 years of service from you, and you can't go anywhere else. Okay, because that nasty HR will make you sign a contract. Okay, so that's where that comes from. The key areas for development in order to achieve all this is selection, performance appraisal, rewards, development of skills. It's all to do with the business, not to do with the individual. Does that make sense? Right? Now, which one is a better model, do you think? Which model do you prefer and why? Sorry? It depends. Who said? You know what? I'm looking good. It depends. What does it depend on? I've got to be careful that I don't fall off here because that would be very embarrassing. Yeah, okay, yep, I'll go with that. I'll buy that one. Yep, that's absolutely right. However, if you're in a position, I completely agree with you. But this is, sometimes you could be in a position where you employ, a large company employing 10,000 members of staff, something's happened, you've got to reduce costs. And you know how it is, you reduce and reduce and reduce, make efficiency savings, and you get to a point where you think, you know what, now it's going to equate to people. Right? And when it gets to that point, nobody likes it. But if we start having a strategy, even a short-term strategy, to decide how we're going to reduce headcount and use a soft approach, you'll never get rid of people and your costs will start escalating. Right? So what you're looking at then is, right, it's very hard and fast, looking at skill sets, looking at tenure, yeah, maybe looking at appraisal records, just for a short period of time to ensure that if you're a company that has always used the softer HRM approach, but now you're thinking, do you know what, we've got a problem. You might think if we do it properly and you do it quickly, and if you do it quickly, it costs less. You're not prolonging people being around, and meanwhile, your costs need to reduce. What you'd be looking at is thinking, do you know what? I can save 9,000 jobs if I just have to say goodbye to 1,000. But if I keep this any longer, I might have to say goodbye to 2,500 jobs. Yes? So it's a Hobson's choice, for those of you that know that. You know, it basically, either way, it's not a great way. But which is the better of the two evils? Does that make sense? So in those circumstances, this can help. But in generally, day to day, most people prefer the Harvard model. Okay? But having the understanding that as well will help you devise your HR strategy. So here you are. You're looking at the human side of HR. You're looking at individuals, treating people as individuals. Also, the importance of communication. So when you are identifying your stakeholders, you have to communicate. You've got to be networked to understand who those stakeholders are. Right? Obviously, concern for individual motivation. Bless you, by the way. Individual growth. Yes? So you are looking at developing people not to benefit the business, but to develop them as individuals. And people are led, not managed, as you were saying, yeah? Provide them with autonomy. Yeah? And involve people. And here, Mitch, again, very, very hard, very mechanical. Yeah? Resource-focused, how many people, where are they working? This very much happens in factories, yes? Where you have a conveyor belt, And different parts of the conveyor belt has different roles, right? You start one and then you hand over to your next person. And it very much is, how many of these do we have, how many of these do we have, and how many of these do we have, right? Very much head count control, management control, because everything has to be done to a certain specification. Always interested in the business outcome, probably profits. Very directive. And again, you're not involving, you just are participating. You come to work, you do your role, you go home. And you're there to meet the needs of the business. Does that make sense? Okay. Have I depressed you all now? No. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on from here, if that's okay. Effective HRM. What we have, as an academic, we have to give you an academic framework sometimes. I've given you Harvard, I've given you Michigan. I've also now given you the 10 C's. So Price, as quoted, as referenced there, talks about whatever you're going to do. So maybe you might want to share some of this with your HR team. Is the 10 C's. Remember the 10 C's when you're aiming to deliver an effective HR function, right? And this is what they talk about. So comprehensive. And again, I'm just going to let you read this slide if you haven't already read it, and ask me if you've got any questions, because I don't want to go through each and every one of them. Is there any questions? Are they pretty self-explanatory or not? Or have I really now put you to sleep? Okay. The biggest focus is on coherence and being comprehensive, making sure that HR strategy understand every aspect of the business, and that is a criticism at times. Yes? Because HR functions go their way and the business go their way, and the HR function starts imagining that it's a business in itself. It's a supporting function, and that has to be, you've got to be mindful of that. Okay? All right. So what else is important for organizational life and improvement in your organizations? So here we have a bunch of people, and I thought I'd put Gareth Southgate there because he's doing a good job, isn't he? He's doing all right. Him and his team, yay! Come on. Yeah. Sorry, obviously I've been watching the football. Right. Okay. So leaders. Yeah. I know some of you are going to think, no, Joshi, not her, not him. But we'll quickly move on. So, can I just ask you, in pairs again, think about the best leader you have known personally. So don't tell me about Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, right? Unless you knew them personally, of course. Right? A good leader that you felt you had in your life in the workplace. And what was it about them that made them the best leader that you've ever had? So I'll give you a few seconds to discuss that. Okay, everybody. That's the few seconds. Hello, can we come back? So, anybody want to share with me, or with us, your best leader and what made them the best? Yes? Are you like, oh my God, I just made eye contact with you at the wrong time? Okay. They had a clear vision. So you had a leader that you felt had a clear vision and listened to people. Yeah? Excellent. Any takers? Any more? Sorry. I'll come back. I'll come back. Excellent. Letting you have enough independence and not constantly micromanaging. Brilliant. Okay. I can relate to some of that. Yes? Understanding people's strengths and weaknesses and put them in the right place. So ensuring that their strengths and weaknesses fit the job roles that are required. Ish? Yeah? Okay. Yes? One more and that's it. Thank you. Cool. Making sure people get credit for their work. How many of us have had leaders who take credit for your work? That's coming. Yeah. So remember, guys, you've just not. Do you know what? You need a counseling session, don't you? Times have been bad. Times have been bad, you know. Okay. So that's interesting. That's very interesting. Let's go then. Okay. So what we have as an academic, we give you an approach, which is called the Great Man approach. This is the godfather of leadership approaches, and there's millions and trillions of leadership approach. But when you look at it academically, there is the Great Man approach. And this was in the 40s, and it dictated that these are the qualities that a leader should have, right? They should have intelligence, integrity, self-confidence, high level of energy, and task-related knowledge, right? And that was it. Then we came up with some criticisms, because the concept is, or the schools of thought are leadership. I've switched it off. Leadership qualities. Is it nature? Or are you born with them, or do you develop them? Right? So there was a criticism that this Great Man approach actually dictated that you were born with them. So if you didn't have them, there was no way that you could ever develop them. Yeah? Okay? Secondly, the task was, is it about behaviors, or is it about, in terms of behaviors, do you focus on the task, do you focus on the people? Now, the Great Man approach talks about you've got to be an expert in your area of work. So how many times have I seen professionals in their professions being promoted to people management duties because they're just great at what they do, and then they are not great at line management? Yes? Because that has to be taught as well, doesn't it? Right? So you are all going to be, or even enhance your architecture skills, right? And some of you may already be leaders now, but some of you, in some time in your career, will be identified as a director or a senior manager because of your skill in how you are an architect. Yeah, your excellence in terms of how you are an architect. Yeah? And you will get promoted. If you're lucky, you'll be trained. But if you're unlucky, you'll have to work people out for yourself. Yes? And that's where the danger is. All right? So therefore, the criticisms of the Great Man approach is, actually, that's not comprehensive. Right? And again, leadership qualities, when you look at all of these, especially the first four, it almost indicates that you have to be an extrovert. Right? You have to be an extrovert. You've got to be able to talk in public. You've got to be able to engage, and you've got to demonstrate that for you to be a great leader, which is absolutely, some school of thought will say, nonsense. Right? So the difference between introverts and extroverts, according to Myers-Briggs type indicator, which some of you may or may not be familiar with, which is a personality test that tells you whether you're extrovert or introvert, right? So the extrovert is somebody who energizes by being around people. Yes? An introvert is somebody who energizes in their own space, right? There is nothing to say that an introvert cannot be a leader. Yes? So the Great Man approach, or the great trait, they do call it Great Man approach because they also talk about those traits being quite male and not female. So all the females, no leadership prospects at all. Luckily, we've moved on. Okay? All right. And again, so two things is, it's not just about the traits or your personality that's important. you've also got to know how you engage with people. Yeah? How do you behave? Your behavior counts. And when we saw those pictures, I'm sure if we had a lot more time, we could have discussed which one, when you look at a picture and you look at what you know about that person, how are they as leaders, in your opinion? Yeah? That would be interesting. And you know, when you're on your break and you're really bored, you can have that conversation, can't you, amongst yourselves? Okay. And finally, relationship with followers, right? The great man approach does not talk about that. It doesn't actually take into consideration the role of followers, which again is a very interesting concept. So, to summarize leadership, there's 3 key areas which feed into leadership theory. So there's 3 types of main leaders. The top one, dictatorial, autocratic. The leader that makes decisions. Yep. And you have consultative, democratic, the leader that solicits views. So, you know, tell me what you think, and then we'll make a decision together, right? And finally, the leader that provides the tools and allows the staff to make the decisions, which is what you were talking about there, right? What we're saying is we need different types of leaders, potentially, for different situations. Yes? Okay. So again, just a little picture just to break the words up a bit. You know, styles of leadership. One would say Hitler was autocratic, Obama democratic, and Mahatma Gandhi laissez-faire. But again, do we need different styles for different situations? Yes? If you were going to, and I'll go back to the redundancy consultation, you are going to have a participative laissez-faire. I'll tell you what to do, you just get on with it. That's not going to help. You need a bit of dictatorial because you need a frameworks. Who was saying you need protocols? Yeah, you were talking about protocols, yes? Yeah, rules. Yes, people need tools, but then people need people to make decisions as well as to what's going to happen. Yes? But then if you're going to go through a big, massive change where none of us know where we're going, we may need the consultative, democratic kind of leader to say, right, okay, guys, we're in this together. How are we going to do this? Yes? We forget that, though. What we do is we look at our leader, and then we say, these are the skills they have, and people promote people, as I said, because of their specialisms in their career choice and their profession, and then forget that leadership also is another piece of training that people need. The most recently, purposeful leadership is another leadership movement that's come into place. And I've quoted the CIPD here, and that's the Chartered Institute of Personal Development. So that's our membership body, if you like, for HR practitioners. Okay? So they do lots of research, and what they've recently come up with is actually leadership is now taking on a new role. Yes? It's talking about actually understanding people a lot more than what we've ever had to before. So first of all, does that individual know their own qualities? Yeah? Are you self-aware of who you are? It's all right me saying, I'm great, I'll tell you what to do, I'll have a chat with you, we'll have consultative, we'll have a little group discussion, you know. Do I know who I am? Right? Am I saying I'm a woman of integrity because that's the word, that's the right thing to say? Or do I really act according to that? And am I aware of that? Yes? So these, and people actually now suss people out now. Because leadership theory, people have studied it more. Right? So people understand that more. Yes? So they say, right, okay, you might say you're, you know, somebody who's fair and you show compassion, but you don't. You have two faces, and people don't like that. People are looking for authenticity now in leaders. So that sense of moral self. Visionary. Somebody mentioned that they set a vision, yes, and then share it with everybody, right? So what is it that we're trying to achieve and how we're going to get there? And again, commitment to stakeholders, right? So it's not just about looking after your employees, but looking after the greater picture, yeah? Our organization, our industry, our society, yes? You know, corporate social responsibility stems from that. Yeah? Does that make sense, you know, right? So there we have purposeful leadership. So you're actually leading with a purpose, but you understand who you are as well. Any questions? Okay. So, irrespective of leadership style, you also need followers, right? And guess what, as an academic? We have theories for followership. Someone's done a piece of research, all right? So again, I'm going to go past this because I'm mindful of time, and I know you need a break, and I know it's hot in here. All right, so I'm doing my best. If I'm trying not to speak too fast. Is the speed okay? All right, okay, right. So Robert Kelly came up with some research in 1992 about, do you know what? Great that you have leaders, but guess what? You also have certain type of followers as well. Now this is interesting because you might not be aware of this. So again, he talks about followers that fall into a grid, which is active, passive, independent, and dependent. Okay? So if I just put that into a picture there, all right? So you've got passive on the right-hand side, active on the left-hand side, independent critical thinking, dependent on critical thinking. So you look at a sheep. So think of, and remember, as a leader, whether it's a team leader, line manager, director, you will recognize these type of leaders in your workforce. So you have a sheep who's a follower, right? They're passive and they're dependent on uncritical thinking. So basically, you tell them what to do and they're going to do it. They're not going to challenge you, right? It doesn't mean that they're committed and loyal. It just means that they just follow you, right? It doesn't mean that they're going to ask those crucial questions like, Joshi, do you think we're going the right way? Because they're just going to be right behind you, right? And fall off the stage if you're not careful, okay? Right? Then you have passive, independent, alienated followers, right? So they're following you, but they're critical of you. Here we go. Seen it, done it, but we'll go with it anyway. You know, right? Yeah? So, and you have to understand who these people are, right? I know when I'm doing a change management project, I always look for those because those are the people that everybody else follows. So if I can get one of them turned to my way of thinking, I know I've got the rest of them. Yeah, it's a strategy, worked all the time, right? Then you've got the yes people, active, dependent, and uncritical thinking. So they're active in terms of they are actually committed, loyal, and they are committed to your purpose, right? But they do that with a purpose because they said, yes, I know the mission statement, I know the values, and I'm sold to the values as well, but I want to get on as well, so I better follow my leader. Yeah, I got to be seen to be doing the right thing. Right? Is that the genuine followers that you want or not? I don't know, but people are people, right? And you can't change people all the time. So those are your yes people. And your effective followers, if you like, where you have exemplary, as we call them, stars, is the active and independent critical thinking. So these are the people who are committed to your cause, are loyal and committed to you as a follower, respect you, but will also ask the questions as well when you need them to. Right? And partly goes back to the point that you made, because you give people, and the comment from the back there, you give people autonomy, right? Which means that they feel confident enough to challenge you, which could mean that you don't fall off the stage. Does that make sense? Yeah? So, and how many of you are aware of followership theory? How many of you have learned something new today? Yeah? So that's interesting, isn't it? Because you'll walk, like, that's my evaluation done. Okay. So, and again, have any of you ever come across group dynamics and Belbin, the work of Belbin? Yes? Yeah? So basically, Belbin has a questionnaire again, goes back years, and you've got a number of questions, you answer them, and it puts you, assesses you in terms of what kind of a group player are you, right? And those are listed there, right? So are you somebody who comes up with lots of ideas? Yeah? Are you somebody who doesn't contribute, but will know where to get things from? So we'll know the right people, we'll know where to get scissors, resources, etc. Right? Are you somebody who's a coordinator? Yeah? Who will keep up with the time? Yeah, making sure that in a group dynamic, you will keep your watch time, and you make sure that tasks have been allocated. You're a completer finisher. Yeah? And a team worker, making sure that everybody's involved. Right? So now, again, with these kind of questionnaires and these kind of tools, we are all aware that all of us have bits of everything. What these questionnaires do is try to identify what your preference is. Yes? Just because you're a team player, that doesn't mean you can't be a coordinator. Yes, you can. But it's what our preferred stance is. Yes? So what a HR strategy or a senior manager would be looking for is ensuring that you understand people in terms of how they behave in a team. So you're not just selecting people when you're looking at executing a HR strategy or executing a business strategy. You're not looking at people to deliver that based on their technical ability, but also on their ability in terms of how they operate in a team. Does that make sense? And you mix that with this, and this could be another hour's debate. Don't worry, I'm not going to be here for an hour. It's okay. All right? But this mixed with understanding how people behave. I told you before, right? My alienated followers. Wow, it's worked. My alienated followers, right? I know I get one of them on board, the rest will follow. Okay. Now, again, this is another piece of academic learning there. Clutterbuck in 2007 talked about 9 key behavioral drivers, right? And again, this is about how do you develop a team that's learning where you have all the roles that are played out, but you also make sure that people help each other to play out the roles that are not being played out. Does that make sense? Because in order for a team to be effective, you've got to have people with ideas. You've got to have people who time watch. You've got to have people who make sure everybody's involved. Yes? So here, a common sense of purpose. So the difference between a group and a team. A group is just a group of people with their individual ideas and individual goals. How you get a group of people, including a workforce, to work together is to give them a common sense of purpose. This is what we're here to achieve. Yes? So today, for this session, you're here to learn about strategic approaches to HR. Right? I'm not going to read them all out because we'll be here all day. Okay? All right? But they're quite self-explanatory. A common sense of priorities. So this is what we're here to achieve, and this is the order that we want to achieve it in. Right? And we agreed that as a group. Does that make sense? Okay? Again, also ensuring that we have the right, safe atmosphere to be able to discuss, yeah, with honesty and be able to challenge, have effective dialogue. Yes, that's important. Can you see how, if you were working in that kind of team, how would you feel? This is how you'd feel. If you were working with a team that was operating just like this now, for the 3 behaviors that I've described, would it be great to work in that team? Yeah? Okay. Also, being open, well, first of all, being self-aware enough to know what your personal strengths and weaknesses are, and being confident to share that, and all of you understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. We all can't be great at everything, and we all cannot be not great at everything. Yes? And it's about having the respect for each other to identify that. Valuing difference as well, right? And again, this happens in many groups where people think, oh, you know what, off he goes again with his ideas. He's going to go on for 15 minutes, and he's going to talk a lot of ideas that we're never going to be able to implement. But one day, if you stop that person from talking, you might have just stopped them telling you about an idea that could have worked. Yes? Yeah, but as a team, it's about ensuring maybe that if you don't have the time to listen to the person's idea, to say, well, do you know what? Can you just tell us briefly what you think it is, and then we'll go on, we'll talk about it further another time. Do you see what there are strategies where you can manage that with respect? Willingness to share knowledge and expertise, okay? So the concept of knowledge is power, where people think that I need to have the knowledge, I don't want to share it with anybody, because A, it makes me look good, and B, I might get a promotion from it. Yes? The whole point of going back to the first one is having a common sense, you know, a common purpose, sorry, a common sense of purpose. You've got to be brought in to be able to share ideas and knowledge as well. Yes? Because you're doing that for the greater good for the team. Okay? Also, develop rapidly an instinctive understanding of how each other thinks. Have you ever worked with anybody, because I have, where you look at them and you haven't even said anything, but they're on your wavelength. They're on the same page as you. How many of you have had that? We've worked with somebody, you got on so well with them, that when you're working with them, they just get it. Yes? They just get it, and you know, and you think, and yeah, you could be in a meeting, you look at each other and you think, yeah, clocked it, we've got it. Do you see what, yeah? Isn't that great to be able to do that? That comes from having respect for yourself and respect for other people as well, understanding that each other has different strengths as well, okay? Having trust in each other's ability and goodwill. So being able to say that, do you know what? I trust that you're going to do a great job. I trust that. I trust you're going to do that. And if it goes wrong, I know your intention wasn't for it to go wrong. So let's work together to put it right. Yes? Finally, generating the buzz, right? That enjoyment. And that the fizz, as they call it, that comes out of working with a great team is amazing. I've worked with some amazing teams. I currently now work with an amazing team. Yes? I look forward to going to work every single day. Do you all have that feeling? No. Right. So, Stephen Covey, another management guru, American as well, it says if you can hire people whose passion intersects with the job, they won't require any supervision at all. So if you hire somebody who has passion for what they want to achieve, you won't need to motivate them at all or supervise them. They will manage themselves better than anyone could ever manage them. Their fire comes from within, not from without. Now, is it really that simple? So everything that we've just said now, yes, in the recruitment campaign, we ask for this, don't we? Who's got passion, motivation, enthusiasm, and then we knock it out of them the minute they walk in, as soon as they've signed the contract. Yes? So it's about having that integrated HR process that follows through to say if you're going to ask for people with passion, then make sure you know how to manage them and retain them. So again, recruitment, which basically this is what I've just said before. Your recruitment strategy has to be aligned to your business strategy. Yep? And also your HR approach. Is it hard HRM? There's no point asking for passionate people with independent thinking, with lots of new ideas, if you've got a hard HRM approach in your organization. Does that make sense? Okay? Finally, employment engagement. So just putting it all together now is we have HR strategy. We have a softer hard HRM approach. We understand that there are different leadership models. We also understand that there are followership. And we understand that we need to understand people, right? So that's, and why? Because we need to know how to engage with people. Yes? We can't engage with people if A, we don't have self-awareness, and B, we are not even interested in understanding our workforce as people. Does that make sense? Okay? So all of that, employee engagement, it is important. If somebody says, you know what, Joshi, I feel overworked, I have a sense of duty to understand exactly where that's coming from. Yes? And is it realistic or not realistic, but at least having the respectful discussion to address that, right? And again, I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but particularly in the workplace, if people feel respected, but it's not as simple as that. If people feel respected, they will engage with you. But people will also flicker. You know, they're great when things are great, and they're not when they're not. But that's, when I'm saying things are not great, it might not just be something in the workplace. It could be something outside as well. So as long as you get the majority of people working with you, that's all you can, ask for. Does that make sense? Okay. 3 types of employees. Okay. So again, developing the point I've just made before is, generally there are 3 types of people. That no matter what you do, there are some people who work with a passion. What I do, and maybe I've had a long career history doing various things, that I've got to a point in my life where I actually genuinely love what I do, right? So it's going to be really difficult to kill my passion, right? That's just me. Nothing special, that's just me, right? And there are some people who are thinking, do you know what, Joshi, I've got 3 years, 2 months, and 10 days to retire. And it's on my clock on the screen. And I'm waiting for my day, the day I walk from here. Yeah? No matter what you do, you're not going to engage them. But you've got to be able to understand and recognize those people. Okay? And there's other people, so these are not engaged. But then finally, actively disengaged people. They're unhappy, not just about work, but they're unhappy about everything. Right? And I say that with emphasis. Right? So it's very difficult that you can get them to accomplish anything where they feel passionate or a sense of achievement. Because they themselves, for whatever reason, and we can't always fix people, they are disengaged. Does that make sense? Okay? Somebody said, sorry. Okay. So again, suggested action to move forward is clarify your strategic stance to people management. So basically, when you're looking at engaging people, we're towards the end now, guys. We're nearly there, right? Okay. Clarify your strategic stance to people management. So how am I going to engage with you? How am I going to show as your leader that I care, right? Or if that's what you want. Consider the required level of engagement of your colleagues. Some people will want more engagement. Some people will want less engagement. You've got to work that out. Develop people strategies to support that. Plan what kind of leader you aspire to be. But it's not just an aspiration from within. You've also got to know what kind of leadership is required in the organization. And that comes with education of different leadership styles, right? Understand your role in a team. What are you good at? What are you not so good at? And again, evaluate the sustainability of your strategies. So measure what you're doing. And keep a check. Ask people. Communicate. That's what engagement's about. Okay. The final slide. I'll just show you the next one so you know. Right. Long-range planning does not deal with future decisions, but with the future of present decisions, right? So read that again. Long-range planning does not deal with future decisions, but with the future of present decisions. So when you're developing your HR strategy, you're not thinking, right, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do this. You're looking at, if we make this decision today, how is that going to impact in the future? Does that make sense? Yeah. Can we get a yes? Thank you very much, and I hope you've enjoyed it.